What is up, everybody? So today I'm doing a video on a topic that I've gotten a lot of requests for in the past, and I think it's an appropriate time to talk about this topic because I am transitioning out of my off season and into my pre-contest phase. So basically, the topic of today's video is going to be 5 tips to have a successful mass gaining phase. I'm going to try to keep this video fairly short compared to my other videos, so if you need any elaboration or clarification on any of the topics, feel free to hit me up on my Instagram DMs or email me at my coaching email, which will be put up on the screen right now. All right, so let's start by defining what a mass gaining phase is. For those of you who aren't competitors, bodybuilders typically refer to this as the off season. But a mass gaining phase is just a period where you're trying to put on what I would suggest would be mostly lean muscle tissue. Why would you want to do this? To improve the appearance of your physique, to improve your body composition, to improve your health as well, and as a competitor, obviously do better as a competitor. So what do you need to do to gain lean muscle tissue? Ultimately, you need to be in a caloric surplus. Now, what that means is that you are consuming more calories than your body is burning a day. So to first start a lean muscle gain phase, you need to find out your BMR. BMR refers to basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of calories your body burns at rest. What you can do is go online, type in BMR calculator, and put in your age, weight, and height, and it will give you a number. Now, what you also have to do is I believe it's called the Harris-Benedict equation, which also adds in potentially your activity level as well. Now, once you have that number, my suggestion would be to start with a small surplus. So that would probably be 250 calories more than that number that you got from the calculator. So now that I've introduced how to go about setting up a mass gaining phase, I want to talk about the first subject that I believe is very important to perfecting your mass gaining phase. Now, this one is going to be really personal to myself. It's funny because I'm almost making this video as a reminder to myself to not make these same mistakes or to kind of follow these guidelines, because somehow along the lines I always end up making some of the same mistakes over and over again for some reason. The first rule I believe is most important for a mass gaining phase is do not chase the scale. What I mean by this is that we ultimately, and I think men may be more guilty of this than women, is that we are a little more ego driven and we want to be big and massive, and we associate being big and massive with weight on the scale. And I don't mean to say that. I think female competitors could also be guilty of this as well, is we just get so caught up in just being bigger, we almost forget what we looked like when we started embarking on a mass gaining phase. So how do we combat this issue? Ultimately, you don't want to start your mass gaining phase at a high level of body fat. I don't normally go off of body fat percentages with myself and with my clients, but I will go off of pictures. If you don't have visible abs, it would not be a good idea to start a mass gaining phase, in my opinion. You can also go off of circumference measurements and also refer to your body fat percentages from previous maybe contest preps or other times when you were leaner. When gaining muscle mass, body fat comes along with it, and you don't want to already be starting at a high level of body fat, because then you're just going to get to a point where maybe you actually become obese from pushing your weight up for a long period of time. Where this has caused problems for myself in the past is that I've pushed my weights up so high and just chased the scale that my body fat gets too high, and I develop a syndrome called METS, which is metabolic syndrome. There are a lot of problems that come along with METS, such as high blood pressure, low HDL, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and ultimately is not a good place to be, especially if you're taking performance-enhancing drugs. It just puts you in a very bad position health-wise. And for myself, it makes me very lethargic and tired, so I can't get other things done throughout the day other than potentially work out, if even that. So that is why it is important to not chase the scale. I myself in the future I'm going to stay at a much lower body fat and not start from a higher body fat when embarking on a mass gaining phase in the future because of that reason. All right, the second thing that you need to be aware of in a mass gaining phase is don't overdo the protein and also fat. It is common practice amongst the bodybuilding industry to have protein at 1.5 to 2 grams per pound of lean body mass. This number is, in my opinion, and in the current science community's opinion, much too high. The problem with having a protein that high is protein is a very high satiety nutrient. When you're trying to consume a surplus of calories, it is really hard to do so when you're eating a lot of calories from protein. Now, what you'll hear from a lot of the coaches in the industry that still practice this high protein amount is that anecdotally, it works better for them and their athletes. I don't subscribe to this belief anymore. I don't take anecdote as a good reason to do anything as a bodybuilder, as an athlete, or any life decision at this point in my life. I think we have a lot of great scientific, or at least substantial scientific research to make good calculated decisions on what we're doing with our nutrition. When you are pushing food, the recommendations currently would be to keep your protein at 0.8 grams per pound of lean body mass, or just body mass in general. The reason for this is that research has found that carbohydrates are protein sparing. So you don't necessarily need to eat as much protein when you are eating an excess of carbohydrates, which you will be doing in a mass gaining phase. Now with fat, I've been doing the vertical diet for over a year now. And basically in the vertical diet, I only get my fat from trace amounts in food. I eat an egg meal every day in the off season. I eat red meat, and I eat whole fat or 2% fat yogurt. As a bodybuilder, you definitely want to keep your protein sources more lean, but I don't believe that you should keep your protein sources to no fat at all. Fat helps with the absorption of micronutrients from your other foods and vegetables, and also cholesterol and saturated fat help with the production of hormones in the body. So ultimately, you don't want to be eating all of your protein from just chicken breasts, egg whites, and whey protein powder. So when you are getting your fats, try to keep it around 0.3 grams per pound body weight. Any higher and you might run into issues with, again, satiety, same issue with protein. If you overconsume fat, you will have a hard time eating your food. Now, don't believe that fat will make you fat. It does not. When compared to carbohydrates, with protein controlled, carbohydrates and fat have very little difference on body composition. All right, rule number 3 is stay on your feet. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, BMR accounts for 70% of your daily caloric burn. The other major influence to the amount of calories your body burns that you can have more control over is your NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is calories burned from doing daily activities and being on your feet. So what happens when you start to push your food up, and then ultimately your weight, is like I mentioned, you may develop some symptoms of metabolic syndrome. And when that happens, you become tired and lethargic. One of the ways to combat this is to stay on your feet and be doing activities throughout the day. So people believe that when you're in an off-season setting, that you need to be sleeping more and resting more, almost like you're a bear in hibernation. I don't really believe this is how the human body works. I think you need 7 to 9 hours and then maybe a nap in between. And also, if you do have apnea, be sleeping with a CPAP mask. But other than that, you shouldn't be on the couch and you shouldn't be laying down or sleeping all day. That will bring you to a place where I believe that will contribute to you developing metabolic syndrome, is not moving. So what you need to be doing is filling your daily activity with other things, such as 3 10-minute walks a day as prescribed in the vertical diet, and which is what I personally do. Also, just doing things around the house. I've also done this more recently if I'm playing video games, even just standing or even kneeling instead of sitting. If you have a desk, maybe getting a standing desk, or if you work at a desk job, getting up and doing a couple laps around the office in between work. Ultimately, just not sitting around doing nothing. The human body, in whatever state you're in, seems to like movement. And when you sit and are inactive for long periods of time, you tend to get a lot of health issues. Other things that play into staying on your feet are nutrient partitioning. I'll link the study below about the 3 10-minute walks, but basically, if you're walking more frequently, your body secretes less insulin and is better at partitioning nutrients to the muscles and to the areas where you need those nutrients. Rule number 4 for mass gaining phase is going to be watch your blood work and your blood pressure. This is important because when your body isn't functioning correctly, you can't gain muscle mass. If your blood pressure is chronically high and your blood work is a mess, the last thing that is going to happen is you're going to gain muscle mass. If you do, the quality is going to be very poor. You're going to retain a lot of water. You may have other health complications, and ultimately you are destroying your quality of life and your health in the process. The process of gaining muscle tissue, I don't necessarily believe is a totally organic state, at least in the way that bodybuilders and physique athletes do it. Couple that with potentially adding performance-enhancing drugs on top of the mix, and you can have a recipe for disaster if you don't pay attention to your blood work and your blood pressure. This goes for the non-competitors as well, and even people not in a mass gaining phase. When chasing your physique-based goals, you should always be paying attention and monitoring your health markers. And finally, the last tip I will give you for a mass gaining phase is going to be treat your mass gaining phase or your off season like a prep. What that means is that you should always take your off season very seriously. I see people posting up all the time about these awesome cheat meals they're having. They're going out and eating all the time. Ultimately, that's going to put you in a position where you develop metabolic syndrome, where you get too high of body fat, and where your results start to slow down or even come to a dead stop. If you are a physique competitor, you should be taking your off season seriously. Bodybuilding is a very difficult sport. It doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but it is something that is with you all the time. And if you do not treat your off season just as serious as your prep, then you aren't going to make the necessary changes that you will need to make the next time you step back on stage. And I believe this is just as important for non-competitors as well. If you are serious about your physique-based goals, there are definitely exceptions you can make if you are not a competitor, but you can't go out and slam 10 drinks on a Friday night and expect that you are going to make solid progress that week, in my personal opinion. So you should have your goal outlined if you are a non-competitor, and you should be aware of that. When you're going out to eat, be conscious and aware of the choices that you are making, and try to limit the amount of meals that you are eating out in general. If you are eating out too much, it is almost impossible to try to quantify the amount of calories you are consuming and ultimately quantify the progress you're making. Our estimates on food can be up to 70% off. And our estimates, especially in restaurants, can be really difficult because those foods tend to be cooked in a lot of oils and sauces. Ultimately, you need to be conscious of how important your goals are to you and how bad you want to make progress. I personally have come to a point where I've invested a lot of time and money into bodybuilding. I'm not going to waste any time missing workouts, skipping meals, going out and eating more than once every week or 2 weeks. If you are serious about your goals, then this is how it needs to be, in my opinion. And I'm not saying there isn't a place and time for time off and rest and not eating diet foods all the time, but I would say that's a very short window of the year if you're someone who is serious about your goals. And if it is something you need to plan into your lifestyle, then it is something you are always conscious of. If you are just a person trying to gain a little bit of muscle mass, I still believe you need to be always conscious of what you're putting in your body for health reasons and for your progress is concerned. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you have any suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, please don't feel free to leave it in the comments or reach out to me on social media. This was a video topic that was suggested to me by people on social media, and I really enjoy doing it. So in the future, if you want to see a video on any topic specifically, please reach out to me. Click the subscribe button. I would love to grow this channel to at least 1,000 subscribers by July. That's a goal of mine. And if you enjoy the content, show your support by clicking that subscribe button, clicking the like button. Anyway, thank you all for watching again. Have a great one.